You're listening to Bad Girlfriend Radio. I'm your host, Bree Schmidt. I'm a relationship coach and educator offering advice and insight that is no shame, no sugarcoat, and no BS. Today's episode is about anxiety, especially anxiety in relationships and dating. Getting to know people and getting intimate can definitely bring up a lot of fears and anxiety, but why does this happen? And what can you do about it? In this episode, I'll be covering these questions and more, so let's get started. Okay, I lied. We can't get started yet because I have to interrupt to tell you that right now, for a limited time, you can get your first one-on-one coaching session with me for half off. Yes, 50% off. And not only that, but half of your payment will then go to a nonprofit called Futures Without Violence. They work to end domestic and sexual violence worldwide, and they help those, especially women and children, who have been affected by violence. I love what they're doing, and I wanted to find a way to help you grow and improve your relationships and have the life that you want while also helping other women at the same time. The coaching that I offer is personalized to you, what you need and what goals you have, whether that be creating healthy relationship habits, dealing with a breakup, or just learning to love being single. Wherever you're at, if you're getting stuck, I'm here to help you using cognitive behavioral coaching strategies to help you get back on track. And again, all of this in your first session is half off. So to sign up now for a one-on-one coaching call with me, go to breeschmidt.com/first session. That's breeschmidt.com/FIRSTSESSION. All right, now let's get on with today's topic. It's summer, and I feel like it's basically my duty now at the beginning of each episode to let you know that the weird buzzing sound in the background is the sound of the cicadas outside. They are just a part of summer in Japan, and they are very loud. Actually, bugs and insects in general are a bit of an issue during summer in Japan. So actually, a couple nights ago, I went down to my kitchen just a little after midnight, and I had this thought, like, what if I run into a cockroach? And sure enough, I was on my way back upstairs after finishing in the kitchen, and I turned the corner, and in my peripheral vision, I thought maybe I just saw an antenna. So I turned back around, I turned on the light, and yep, there is a roach. When I lived in the U.S., I lived in Texas and Ohio. And in Ohio, I don't think I ever saw a roach. But in Texas, just once, I saw one in my family's kitchen. But here in Japan, they are ubiquitous. Like, they are just a part of summer. So after seeing that roach, I've been kind of irrationally fearful, I admit, of my kitchen. And so my husband and I called an exterminator just in case, just to do what we can to make sure that it doesn't get any worse, that we won't see any more cockroaches. But honestly, it's been triggering a little bit of anxiety in my house. And actually today, we're talking all about anxiety, and our focus is not on bugs and insects, but of course, this being a relationship podcast, we are talking about anxiety in relationships and dating. But why? Why is anxiety so common when it comes to relationships and dating and, romance and intimacy? So there are a few key reasons for this. One big reason is that the attachment that happens between romantic partners can stir up a lot of what we learned from our childhood attachments. So if as a kid you had an insecure bond with a parent, for example, then you may have some anxiety and insecurities now with romantic relationships as an adult. And if you had unhealthy or insecure attachments growing up, then it's likely that you may be choosing unhealthy or insecure relationships as an adult too. So you may be gravitating towards people who just are not right for you. And by the way, attachment isn't only based on childhood attachment. Actually, even if you had a deep bond with an ex or someone else from your adulthood, but maybe that relationship was traumatic or you had a really difficult breakup, then that can also carry over into future relationships as well. So, of course, as you can guess, this can definitely create a lot of anxiety and anxious thought patterns. Another big reason that anxiety comes out so much in relationships is that you probably care about your partner or a potential partner if you're dating a lot, right? You care about them a lot. Like if you're single but you're dating around, then you probably actually really want a partner. And it feels like there's a lot to lose if you can't find someone good. If you're already in a relationship, then you probably don't want to lose that person and that security. So the loss feels big. So with that, there may be more fears, which then leads to more anxiety. And with relationships, it can feel different compared to, like making progress in your career or something else really meaningful to you, because you simply cannot control the other person. With something like getting your dream job, you might decide that you're just going to keep applying, keep working on your resume, like keep climbing the ladder, even if it takes time. And you may just feel like you have more control over that outcome to get ahead in your career. I mean, if you're like me, you might just be like, F it, I'll just have my own business. I'll be my own boss. And you don't really have to wait for someone else's permission to go after the career that you want. But with a relationship, there are two people, and you can only control yourself. That's only 50%. The other person is completely in control over themselves. You can have some influence on a relationship, but you can't control it or the other person entirely, right? And especially when you're just meeting people and going on dates, you may put everything you can into the date going well, but you have no control over if they like you, if they'll ask you for a second date, if they'll message you back. So this feeling of a lack of control can definitely create some anxiety. And with committed relationships too, you can't make the other person do exactly what you want them to do. And the truth is, they may take actions sometimes that hurt you. And if you've been hurt before, then you may feel some anxiety about being hurt again. So if any of this sounds relatable to you, trust me, you are not alone at all. So if you have anxiety in intimate relationships or in dating, what can you do? To answer this question, I'm going to talk about my own experience, because the truth is, I have anxiety sometimes. And at certain points in my life, I think I probably could have been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. But these days, I don't have nearly as much anxiety as I have in the past. But funny enough, my relationship can definitely trigger some anxiety and cause me to be reactive and go into my old fears. And I've mentioned before that my attachment style is anxious. Out of the three most basic types of attachment, there's secure, anxious, and avoidant. I'm actually anxious. Although I've adopted a lot of secure habits and behaviors, but still I have my moments of anxiety where I ask my husband, like, you love me, right? What makes me valuable to you? Like, why did you choose me? Why did you want to marry me? Like, I have those moments of insecurity. And you might be thinking like, oh my God, this relationship coach is all needy and anxious, and she has anxiety in her relationship. Why in the world would she be coaching people on relationships? Well, for the same reason that I said before, anxiety can come up in intimate relationships because of fears and insecurities that we've picked up from trauma and from difficult experiences in our past, from past attachments. This is exactly why I still have some anxiety now. Not that I'm blaming anyone or anything, but there is definitely some roots in my childhood. And this is why I'm a coach. It's because I've struggled with romantic relationships and with my own family relationships, especially growing up. There were a lot of difficult experiences that were thrown at me before I was even mentally or emotionally developed enough to be able to properly understand and cope with those experiences. So coming out of that childhood, I could have become a lot of things. I could have become an addict of some kind, like an alcoholic or a drug addict. I could have decided to commit to a relationship with an abusive partner. I could have molded myself to become whatever someone else wanted me to be. I could have been someone without any goals or dreams or a sense of self-worth and self-esteem. I could have ended up in more dangerous situations, but I didn't. I just walked away with some anxiety that doesn't actually run my life, and anxiety that I can handle in healthy ways without trying to escape it or numb myself. I experience anxiety sometimes, as you probably do too if you're listening to this, and I'm not broken because of it, and neither are you. And everything that I've learned that got me here, where I'm more or less mentally healthy and I can deal with my anxious thoughts and difficult emotions, that is why I help others with relationships. Someone who might have grown up in a really stable, loving environment, most of their relationships have been secure and they've never really experienced much anxiety, they may not be able to coach someone who has had those experiences. They may not have the compassion for those whose experiences haven't been so secure, right? So knowing that I came from the upbringing that I came from, and I've actually been really insecure in relationships before, and finally I got to a point in my adulthood where I knew that things had to change, and I did. I changed them, right? That's why I coach and educate women on relationships and having healthy relationships. So from my experience, how did I know that I had anxiety? So anxiety, like many other things, is experienced both physically and mentally. It's in your thoughts, but it's also in your body. And when you have anxiety, you might not even notice the thought that triggered an anxious response. But you will start to notice your body reacting. You will start to notice those anxious feelings in your body. Back when I was about 19 years old, there was a guy who I knew from high school. And back in high school, I had such a huge crush on him. And I eventually actually left that high school that we shared when I was about 15. So I really didn't have much contact with him between the ages of 15 and 19. So then 4 years later, our paths crossed when I was 19. And I thought, okay, maybe this is the time that we'll finally end up together. Maybe this is fate. We're supposed to be together. I knew it. So I was so excited that we started talking again. And then we started hanging out. But it was that kind of confusing gray area where you're left wondering, is this a date or are we just hanging out? Are we dating? What is this? And I was so fearful of losing his interest. And I think that I probably believed that I would lose his interest. I had that belief that created a lot of anxiety that eventually he'll find something wrong with me, And sure enough, he did start pulling away. And eventually, he just downright ghosted me. And around that time, even when I wasn't consciously thinking about him, I was in anxiety mode. I was in that state, that physical state of anxiety. And every time that I would try to eat, I would actually get full after about 3 bites of food because I was experiencing severe acid reflux, all from anxiety. So like I was saying, anxiety is based in our thoughts, but it also has a huge influence on our bodies. And the reason for this is that anxiety is a stress response. So your body is going into fight or flight mode, ready to take on some kind of threat. So of course, something obviously life-threatening, like a lion running after you, that would cause stress, right? And then maybe after having that experience, you might still have some ongoing anxiety because now you have this fear of a lion chasing you again or something else really life-threatening happening. But this kind of response can also happen when, your high school crush ghosts you. And for me, back then, the feeling that I had, the physical manifestation that I had was acid reflux. But it could be trouble sleeping or muscle tension or a dry mouth, feeling really tired, having like an uncomfortable, heavy feeling in your chest, nausea, so many uncomfortable physical sensations. I had this thought when I was 19 that I would be happier if I dated him, that my life would be better. So therefore, my happiness and my well-being kind of felt like it depended on him. Does that sound crazy? Yeah, maybe. But maybe you can relate, especially if you've been disappointed by dates that you've went on, or you went through a breakup. Like, that's a huge one, right? Where that grief of what could have been with an ex, the future that you could have had together, right? Losing that can absolutely trigger anxiety. So the thought is distorted, and it does sound a little crazy, but you're not at all crazy. This is actually really normal. And these distorted thoughts really are the heart of anxiety. They are the drivers. And if you experience anxiety often, you probably have at least one negative, distorted thought that keeps coming up. And for me, I could only notice my own distorted thoughts, the ones I've been carrying around for years. I only started to get to know them once I talked to a therapist. And that therapist used cognitive behavioral therapy, which is actually the reason why I use cognitive behavioral coaching now with clients, because it is the same framework that helped me, although I kind of add my own twist and style to it. But I seriously could not have understood, one, the thoughts that I was actually having, and two, that they were so distorted if I didn't talk to someone who helped me to recognize that. So once I recognized my distorted thoughts, when they would come up again, I could catch them and ask myself, is this something I want to believe in? Do I have reason to believe this? Okay, maybe not, so let's move on. And this is why dating slowly and actually taking your time to get to know each other in a new relationship is so great, because you have more time to check in with yourself and catch those negative thoughts. I was dating a bit, meeting some new people back in my first year of living here in Japan, and that is when I met my husband. But you know what? I canceled our first 2 dates. And I don't recommend that. But I was actually getting really sick a lot around that time. So I canceled honestly just because I was sick with like a cold or something, and I just wasn't really feeling good. But he didn't give up. He didn't give up in trying to meet me. And actually, side note, if you have a lot of anxiety in relationships, then choose a partner who doesn't. Choose a partner who is more secure, and especially choose a partner who doesn't share a lot of the insecurities and triggers that you do. Choose someone who can help you to rationalize your anxious thoughts, not someone who will feed them. So my husband back then, when we were setting up dates and I was canceling because I was sick, he didn't even read much into it. He didn't take it as a rejection, and he persisted in asking me out. And for that, I am very thankful. And that kind of set the tone that I can take things slow and he won't, vanish. He'll still be there. And in the beginning of our relationship, we saw each other regularly, but then after we would hang out, I would go to my apartment alone and I would just kind of check in with myself. I would notice what anxious thoughts and feelings were coming up, and I would take time to break them apart and basically coach myself through it and decide if the anxiety was from my own personal triggers, from my own past, or if it was actually about him. And typically it was my own junk, my own anxieties, from my past relationship or my childhood. So really, by taking it slow, we could stay together and I could keep myself grounded through our relationship and through those anxious thoughts. I had time to digest them, and, we're now married, so it worked out. So really getting to know your thoughts, especially your distorted thoughts, and taking the time to check in with yourself is key. But like I said before, anxiety can also be physical. You may notice a thought and decide that it's negative and it's not serving you, and you will not listen to that thought, but you still may have some kind of heaviness in your chest or some nausea or some other kind of physical feeling of anxiety. And for this, my advice for you is just to simply sit with it. Don't try to change it. Don't try to force yourself to feel better. Just accept it. There are times when I feel anxious, and actually this is pretty personal, but I mentioned it before in one of my very first episodes, so I'll just go ahead and mention it again. One of my biggest anxiety triggers is when my husband drinks. Now, he doesn't drink often. He doesn't really drink too much. But I grew up in an environment where alcoholism was present. So that for me is a trigger, period. I don't beat myself up over it. I don't feel resentment towards the people in my life who made the mistakes that they made. I don't blame anyone or feel any anger over it. I just accept it. A loved one going out drinking, it is a trigger for my anxiety. I would have to essentially erase years and years of my memory to feel nothing about it. So I'm aware that this is a trigger. It's not a surprise to me. I know it. I'm aware. I accept it. And I communicate with my husband. You know, he communicates his plan to me, and we set some boundaries to help so that I can keep myself in control. He can keep himself in control. And then, sometimes he goes out and I feel tense. I feel physically tense. And I know rationally that it's okay, but I still might have those physical feelings of anxiety. I might try to go to sleep that night alone when he's still out, and I just can't. I can't fall asleep. But as long as we follow the boundaries and intentions that we decided on before he went out, and he can be compassionate towards this being a trigger for me, then when that anxiety comes up and I'm feeling physically uncomfortable, I just accept it. The thing is, you are not your anxiety. You are not your anxious thoughts or feelings, but you experience those thoughts and feelings. But you are not them. You are not your anxiety. For a long time, I've imagined my anxious thoughts are kind of like this dumb, annoying monster in my head. And I have to remember that is not me. He or she just kind of lives up there, like renting a room in my head. But it's just one room. There are other rooms that I can fill with whatever I want. That monster is just like one annoying tenant. And that tenant, unfortunately, has lifelong housing. They have a lifelong housing contract with me in my head. Honestly, I'm not going to waste my time and energy trying to kick them out, but I will spend my time and energy on being aware of the monster and the annoying thoughts that come from the monster, and then filling up the other rooms in my head with better tenants, better thoughts. And sometimes that monster does something stupid, like, I don't know, setting the kitchen on fire, and then boom, I have tense shoulders and acid reflux. I don't know. Where is this metaphor going? I don't know. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that you are not your anxiety, but you do live with it. You may still see the anxious thoughts come up, but then you can challenge them and choose to not listen to them. And likewise, you may feel anxiety in your body sometimes. But you can also choose to be gentle with yourself and know that it's not your fault when this happens. Your anxiety is not your fault. And there isn't any need to try to completely get rid of your anxiety. Instead, just be aware of when and how it comes up for you, and accept that it will come up sometimes, and that's okay. You can be mentally healthy and still have anxiety sometimes. It's not an either or, black or white situation. I'm interrupting here to make sure that you've already signed up for freebies, including free worksheets, quizzes, and other online resources, plus updates and future discounts on coaching and more. If you haven't already signed up, make sure to go to brieschmidt.com/sign up and you'll get instant access to the full digital resource library. Here you can take quizzes like what's your attachment style or how assertive are you? Or you can download guides and worksheets like the guide to navigating your next big relationship fight, a worksheet to help you plan your future, and more, and it's all free. So again, make sure to sign up at brieschmidt.com/sign up. Now let's get back to today's topic. So let's get back to relationship anxiety specifically. So I talked a little bit already about why it happens, and I shared some of my own personal experiences. And for me, a lot of my anxiety was about a fear of rejection and a fear of being betrayed. I really wanted stability, and I was afraid that if I shared that with someone, then it would just fall apart in one way or another. This might sound like you, or maybe it doesn't. So here are some other signs of relationship anxiety. You put a lot of value on pleasing others and making them happy, even if it means hurting yourself. You avoid getting close, or you have a pattern of pulling away right when things start to get serious. You also might avoid confrontation or difficult conversations in the relationship. When your partner doesn't do what you wanted or they make a mistake, you are highly reactive and often do and say things that you end up regretting later. You're skeptical of partners or dates, and when they seem like a good match, you remind yourself that it's probably too good to be true. You have spent literally hours of your time analyzing someone's actions, what they said, how long they took to message back, and you don't know how to stop overthinking everything. You spend a lot of time preparing for the worst case scenario, whether that be a breakup or someone cheating or you being ghosted. You have a really hard time relaxing during sex and physical intimacy on a regular basis. You feel extremely uncomfortable when your partner doesn't message or call back quickly. And if they're not messaging you or physically with you, then you worry about what they might be doing without you. You feel any of the physical sensations that I mentioned earlier when you're thinking or talking about your relationship or about dating. So if some of these sound like you, then you might be experiencing anxiety. And while, yes, this can affect your relationships and it can make dating not so fun, you are not broken. But you might be carrying around some thoughts that are just not serving you. And one of the most helpful things that you can do for yourself is to dive into those thoughts and start to challenge them. I also briefly mentioned attachment style before, and I have a short quiz that you can take to find out what your attachment style is if you haven't already. So that quiz is on my website in the digital resource library. So if you haven't signed up yet, it is totally free. Just go to brieschmidt.com/sign up and you'll get the password to access the attachment style quiz and all the other freebies. And remember, I am a relationship coach who is happily married, and even I experience anxiety in my relationship. You deserve a healthy relationship, whether you have anxiety or depression or any other mental or emotional struggle. You are still worthy of good things, and you are capable of good things, my friend. All right? Thanks for listening, as always. Until next time.